with the latest news that is happening in the market. As you would have heard, the recording button has been started, so kindly accept that as well, so that we can share this message later on with others who are not able to join live today. So Cummins Live, various topics, from technical topics based on gensets, our core product, to industry news and industry specific panels with other industry experts. And today, for our panel discussion here today, I'm really lucky to have two of my esteemed colleagues. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you all to Magdalene Mikhail, Maggie. She is in charge of a huge area in the Middle East and the Gulf, from supporting technically towards some of our most complex projects, be it in data centers or in other applications as well. So I'm really happy to have Maggie here, who's got firsthand experience dealing with a lot of our major clients worldwide. So welcome, Maggie, and thanks for taking the time. And at the same time, I've also got my very good friend who's joining us from South Africa, Mr. Warwick Gibbons. He is the power gen leader currently for Cummins South Africa, but also Warwick comes with many years of technical experience, again, in a similar field, designing for very complex mission critical projects, including data centers and across various industries. So it's a pleasure having both of you here today. So without further ado, I am going to get started. Just a couple of reminders. By default, everybody is on mute, but you will see at the bottom of the screen the Q&A window. This is supposed to be informative and engaging. So if you've got a question, we've got our colleagues on the other end that will feed your questions, and we ourselves will try and answer your specific questions live here today. If you have any opportunities or specific projects that you would like to discuss, feel free to stick it in the chat window, or you can always email us, and I will share with you our email address at the end of the presentation. And of course, we will try ongoing to answer your questions, or towards the end of the panel discussion today, we will try and field some of your questions as well. So to the questions, Maggie, let me just stop sharing the screen here. And Maggie, the first question is to you. Is the last time we met, had a market update, was over a year ago. Since then, is COVID finished? I mean, is it over in the Middle East? Is data center, the general Middle Eastern environment, back to business as usual?
So first of all, thank you, Dushan, for having me today part of the panel. It's my pleasure being one of you today. And back to your question, is covered over in the Middle East? Actually, it's the question of everyone. And going back to the old normal will always be a question, will always be a challenge, and will always be a hope to all of us. So if we look to the numbers in terms of the numbers of the COVID-19 cases in the Middle East or the MENA region, we are touching base for the 14 million, as the last update of September 2021. For the GCC countries, we are contributing with around 2.5 million cases, right? But despite that, despite these big numbers, we are seeing on the business sectors, organizations are shifting between the 100% working from home policy to hybrid, between working from home and back to offices. And the projects and site kind of coordination is back to 100% working from sites. This is from the organization perspective. You look to the education sector, for example, in UAE, now it's 100% going to school, no more online learning starting October 2021. If you look to the society and other parts of the sectors, things seem to be back to normal. Actually, the expo of Dubai has already started. I just came in the morning, I was in the WETEX. So things seems back to the old normal despite the masks and the social distancing. But actually, on the business side, I'm seeing things are scaling up. What we had missed in 2020, I believe we can restore it this year or even in 2022. I'm very hopeful that 2022 will be very similar to back to normal or the old normal in terms of business and even in terms of our day-to-day kind of activities. So if you look to the vaccination ratings that GCC have invested during the last months, it's really fascinating to see this number of people have been vaccinated and back to meeting each other, at least with the social distance. So yes, I'm very hopeful that 2022 will be partially our old normal.
Thanks, Maggie. That's insightful, and I'm sure you've seen the headlines today, right? On Khaleej Times, it's very proudly saying how UAE has actually beaten COVID, and after many, many months, at least from the middle UAE perspective, the numbers are below 200 per day. That's what's being reported. Which takes me to Warwick. Warwick, a couple of months ago, we were all quite alarmed, of course, with the third wave, right? There was a lot of concern of how that would play out. In terms of data center, number one, firstly, is the third wave under control? And secondly, is South Africa open for data center business?
Afternoon, Dishon, and to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, certainly, vaccinations are in progress, with infections significantly, Dishon, on the decline. As a reminder, the COVID-19 pandemic, has been a strong market enabler for digital transformation initiatives across both the private as well as the public sector enterprises in South Africa. A huge spike of cloud-based technologies and applications were realized during the peak of COVID, and in my view, these trends are certainly continuing. As we all know, most schools during the peak of COVID-19 were based offsite, with several social media platforms or apps used for children to log on to. We also did see that new operational and working trends were realized, some of which included employees either working from home or a combined offsite on-site hybrid approach, all of which have resulted in further cloud-based technology reliance. If I have to give some examples of increased volumes of cloud-based applications and internet usage outside of homes, what comes to mind is typical medical remote consultations, additional surveillance and monitoring due to offsite working conditions, governmental COVID testing data capturing, as well as the normal spike usage that we did see between corporates and typical SMEs. Applications and usage on a personal level, and as we all know, and in my view, there was a lot of activity around Zoom, Teams, OneDrive, and other cloud-based storage options. Online banking and smart home device fitness devices have also become popular during COVID. So although South Africa has moved to COVID-19 level 1, which is almost 600 days later, many of the cloud-based technologies and digitalization adaptations have become a way of life. So yes, Dishon, data centers, in my view, certainly are open for business. So Dishon, I've basically highlighted the constraints and where we are, with COVID in South Africa. So in your view, what is the situation in East and West Africa?
Thanks, Warwick. So it's quite interesting, the situation in Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, let me comment on the two regions you've asked me about. Some of you may have followed already that the president of Ghana was in front of a global audience not too long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, and pointed out something I think that's quite interesting, right? I'm not going to comment on the medical accuracy of this or not, but essentially his statement was that the predictions that a lot of African countries would be suffering hugely because of the pandemic. According to his view, the president of Ghana just simply did not materialize. Even with the medical infrastructure that they have, the number of beds, and the availability of vaccines, it appears that for whatever reason, the pandemic hasn't affected quite a lot of African countries that badly. Again, I'm not going to comment on why that is. Perhaps it could have been because, the flights, the transport links to major hubs were cut off preliminarily, so to avoid the spread. Maybe it's low population densities in some of the Western African countries, right, which have sort of created natural barriers. But in Ghana, apart from the fact that foreign direct investment had stopped effectively in March 2020, right? As foreign operations sort of withdrew, went remote, these countries suffered economically. And even the same case as Kenya, when I'm talking to our counterparts in Kenya, they're saying, look, everything's going on as normal, right? The business is back as normal. The data center projects were delayed, yes, but now they're back on, and we are definitely hearing of significant large projects that are coming up across East Africa and even West Africa, right? That are back on the map, so to speak. Maggie, I'm going to come to you on that note. There were multiple projections of how data center growth would be pre-pandemic in 2019, early 2020. And then for a few months, we had a complete stop. Do you think there are changes in the data center market size in the Middle East? And any information that you might be able to provide on potential growth?
A good question, Dishon. Actually, right to your point, there was a different expectation pre-pandemic than post-pandemic regarding the data center industry market. So pre-pandemic, we were talking about 4% growth in the data center industry. Nowadays, post the pandemic, the expectation reached up to 7%. We are talking about the period until 2025. So the market by revenue, we are expecting to grow across the 3.5 billion by 2025 for the MENA region. So of course, as you know, the industry had witnessed significant growth in the recent years. So countries in the Middle East looking to improve their digital economies. They're involved in different, variable smart cities projects, which is actually the fuel to the data center markets in the region. Of course, this increase in the smart cities initiatives and expected to develop for the edge computing and edge data centers among these countries in the GCC. So countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia are emphasizing on the importance of the data in improving, the communication about the cities and automobiles and on devices. So, having said that you can expect what is the level of impact post the pandemic, this kind of application will impact the data center market. In addition to the 5G deployment, right? So if you look to the advertisement when you go to the streets, something usually nowadays, you will see the mobile applications or the mobiles which is deployed on the 5G. So the 5G is already started in our region, and it will provide over a capacity of 10 megabytes per second. So with this mega speed has to be packed up with data centers that can scale up to this kind of speed. And this will lead, of course, to drive the data center business moving forwards and the need for more data centers and more hyperscale data centers in the region. So yes, to your point, there is a significant impact of the pandemic over the scaling of the data center markets in the region as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Maggie. There's a couple of important things that you've mentioned. Number one, you've said that the growth rate has actually improved, and I've seen that number come up as well. I'd like the audience to comment as well if you've got any information that you would like to share on this, and particularly this question, this next question, Maggie. You mentioned 5G deployment. We have seen almost all the Middle Eastern countries deploy 5G as at least a fixed wireless internet service in some form. Apart from the smart cities and 5G, what other factor can you think of that is impacting this growth for data centers? Is it just the pandemic, or is it something else?
Yeah, I always think of four main factors that will impact the data center industries in the upcoming years. So if you look to the government support to boost the digital economy in the Middle East, specifically after the pandemic, it's massive, right? Also, if you look to the business sectors and the cloud adaptation kind of strategy, organizations are moving towards it. It's actually really impressive. In addition to the smart cities initiatives, of course, as we have touched based upon for our region. And of course, there is a lot of new capitals and new cities in different areas of the Middle East, which is working or operating on 100% renewable. So with these four in mind, and you look to the market news and what is happening in our area, you can have a better understanding about how much this will impact the data center market. So for example, if we look to Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the new big vision of 2030, which is considered 100% renewable energy operation. This project is predicted to cross the $500 billion, right? And a lot of sayings about this will be the world firsts from the project's owner for this 100% renewable deployment in terms of operation and management systems. So it's clearly a view that there is a significant sign that Saudi Arabia is committing to think big when it comes to smart cities vision. And of course, this will impact directly the data center market. If you look to a country like UAE, for example, there is an impressive new technology in the constructive sector is happening. So there is what we call the 3D printing movement. It's a new technology in the construction that will scale up the construction time and will decrease the labor cost. So we are talking about 50% labor cost decreasing and 50% increasing in the construction time. So developer Amar is aiming to do this kind of construction and to put the pilot project maybe next year or so. So with this in mind, this will scale up the construction activities, and of course will scale up the new cities and the new areas. And of course, this will impact by default the data center market for the residents who are in this new areas or facilities. So this is other thing to give you some insights about the impact of the data centers for the e-market. And of course, we have talking about the 5G deployment as well. If you look to a country like Egypt, for example, Egypt has started the smart sustainable city of its new capital, which is will have around 8 million residents in this new capital, right? And it's said that it will be a sustainable city, which will have, of course, a lot of smart deployment activities, and a big data center market will be that. So Orange Egypt, of course, had started managing an operation of a new massive data center in the smart city. So if you look to these factors and the market movement, you can understand how big the data center will be, a big industry in the upcoming years in the Middle East and the MENA region in general. But I have a question in mind to you, Sean. So this is the factors affecting the Middle East data center market. What about the factors impacting the growth for the data center market in Africa? How do you see things moving for the data center market in Africa?
So interesting question, but there are some obvious differences, Maggie, based on where we are in the Middle East and where we are in West Africa or East Africa. You've mentioned, for example, the deployment of 5G, right? In most Middle Eastern countries, especially Kuwait, we know that for a while, that 5G infrastructure has been deployed. UAE is going very aggressively on their deployment, and Saudi is not far behind. Now, these are not there. There are no 5G networks today in any West African country. But that they're not far away. I think what will happen is West African operators will start offering 5G service, and that can become a factor for growth. So the factors that are impacting Africa today is mostly based on the realization of what happens when you don't have good connectivity. So there is a lot of demand now, right, for cloud services because of the challenges faced by enterprises in West African nations and in East African nations, where they've had to cope and they've had to learn with the challenge of working remotely, which they previously didn't have. And so the infrastructure wasn't there, but now the infrastructure has to be developed. And I think all of these countries, there's a significant demand for high-speed internet. There's a significant demand for fiber. There's a significant demand for cloud storage solutions, which enable people to be mobile and working. So things that were easy relatively for other countries in the Middle East or even for South Africa to adopt, these capabilities is driving. I think it's perhaps fairly safe to say that we won't see self-driving cars in these cities at the same development timeframe as we see perhaps in Dubai or in Doha or in Riyadh. But again, the opportunity presents itself for any West African nation today or any East African nation to build the infrastructures, and those are the factors that are very keenly driving the growth in these countries. Warwick, talking about growth drivers, if you just step outside South Africa in the wider SADC region, what are, in your opinion, the growth drivers?
Okay, Dishon, let me give you a few examples of a few countries. Let me start off with South Africa. So I think if you look at South Africa as an example, some key indications of growth drivers. The data center market in South Africa, the market sizing investment is expected to reach more than $3 billion by 2026, with a CAGR estimated over 15% over the next 5 years. South Africa's internet penetration is only 65%, with an increase of users year on year realized. South Africa's social media users are below 50%. In other words, there's less than 25 million users that are actively using this platform. This certainly paves the way for future customer demand. South Africa's deregulation and relaxation of the national electrical power sources is predicted to further attract DC investment to keep up with the country's demand of cloud-based usage and digitalization conversion. Within SADC regions, specifically with SADC customers, a growth driver is really depending on, in my view, two ways of actually getting to the customer. One is physical co-location data centers, and two is through content delivery networks. So in layman's terms, that's just a group of differently located servers that work together to provide fast delivery of internet content. Now, SADC countries, as we know, continue to experience bandwidth deficits. And it is for this reason that South Africa continues to support enterprises outside of South Africa. Examples of this is within Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, as well as Mozambique. So while these countries continue to grow economically and user demand shifts towards digitalization, internet improved speed options, and user experience, such levels of service and functionality will become an expectation thus, in my view, driving the need for data center accessibility and improved technology. Now, further to that, co-location of data center facilities, some of which reside in the DRC, Tanzania, Madagascar, and even Mauritius, continue to offer multi-tenant data center users access to infrastructures like never before. With a variety of tailored rentable cloud-based options, customer interests in selecting such solutions to meet their IT operational needs has been realized. Converted users, both individual and commercial, in my view, will seek improved uptime, continuity, deployment, and flexibility solutions bespoke to their needs. And Dishon, let's not forget about the startup companies, wanting to modernize from inception. Data centers offer scalable and immediate on-demand remote computing and data storage options, therefore lowering individual customer investment and therefore enabling a lower infrastructure cost for these startup companies. And lastly, through continued consumer use and realization of service options and available benefits, I do believe consumers will adopt a managed emphasis on managed cloud-based service strategies as opposed to a standard cloud-based service strategy. And some of these benefits include various software and virus solution package options, IT data security options, as well as IT strategic initiatives and growth management options. So in my view, just by considering these initiatives within these various countries, these will be the growth areas and drivers, Dishon, to stimulate the data center growth and investment segment.
Hey, Warwick, there's something really interesting you mentioned that you touched upon briefly, saying that, and we've all seen that news, that South Africa has now made it open for privatized IPP projects, large scale. Previously, there was a cap on how much private generation could be. Now that's essentially been lifted, as far as I understand. This is a question we keep on coming back to time and time again. It's a well-known fact that South Africa faces seasonal power shortages, power outages. We have seen how it can affect all manners of business, from large scale to SMEs. Do you think the power shortages in South Africa are going to affect the drivers that you've just mentioned right now?
Interesting question. I think the simple answer is, Dishon, is both yes and no. I think the impact would be significant if you consider the following factors. The average person, including some SMEs, are more self-reliant. So yes, certainly, with no genset backup or access to data center support systems during power failures, certainly this will impede their ability to operate. On a larger scale, data center tier ratings 1 and 2, as we know, gensets are not prime rated continuous for the full demand load, hence utility source power or the lack thereof will affect the reliability of customer usage within their applications. Total cost of ownership financial modeling, in my view, would also be impeded as the operational costs would spike significantly, as an example, diesel, thus acting as an investment detractor. Look what happened a few days ago on the 4th of October. Social media platforms, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, they were hit hard by a massive power failure. The details, I don't think we'd ever get to know, but this impacted millions of people. Revenue streams were significantly affected. If we look on the other side, where the impact might be less severe, there could be a few scenarios as well. Looking at data centers with tier ratings 3 and 4 gensets. As we know, again, these gensets are prime rated continuous for the full demand load. Hence, utility source power is treated more as an alternative source of power. So without utility power, this wouldn't be as significant as tier rating 1s and 2s. As you mentioned, Dishon, deregulation and relaxation of national power sources, in my view, will attract foreign data center investment. resulting in less reliance on utility power. And as we all know, alternative sources of energy could include wind, solar, hybrid combinations, and of course, and particularly within South Africa, but it could apply to other governmental agencies, wheeling agreements. If government allows wheeling agreements where you produce in one area and your takeoff is in a different area, these kind of things will alleviate the stresses on our grids. If I look at carbon taxation and associate regulations with CO2 emissions, combined with global political pressures to utilize greener and alternative sources of energy, these will all promote less reliance on the traditional utility sources of power like coal. So those are just a few factors, Dishon, of the yeses versus the no answer. So Dishon, that being said, and clearly I've outlined some of the constraints that we have as a result of these power challenges, depending on the tier ratings of the data centers. In your view, in your opinion, countries in West Africa, now we know that there's also power challenges there, but yet we still see growth. What is driving that? What is your views on that?
Yeah, Warwick, that's actually something that I can explain quite easily. And it drives back to the question of operational costs. But before I go into operational costs, the example I'd like to give is, for example, a data center operator who comes into the Middle East knows that he's coming into an environment where his facility is going to be in a higher ambient temperature. So all the equipment, his cooling load is going to be higher, his PUE is going to be higher, right? We also know he needs to derate for that temperature. So it is an operational acceptance. And in West Africa, actually, it is no different. So I'm sure you know, the only tier 4 rated data center is currently operational in Nigeria from Cloud Exchange. And it goes to show that, when people are coming into that market, they come in with the knowledge. And that's, of course, where, partners like our local distributors can really help give people that insight, give consultants that insight, give end users that insight as to what is your operational challenge going to be? How much is your generator going to run or not? If you take a design that is meant for Amsterdam and try and just replicate that into Accra, yeah, it's you're bound to fail. That's a guarantee, right? So West African growth continues because operators coming in, end users coming in, consultants coming in, people like us, we factor in the cost of running a business. We factor in that into that facility. Dishon so thinks that that's probably the main reason why growth continues. Maggie, something interesting Warwick talked about. He was talking about cloud adoption in South Africa. In the Middle East, that is little expanded. We're talking about digital transformation now. Companies are already on the cloud, and they are now adopting it to higher utilization. Can you give a few examples of how cloud adoption or digital transformation is impacting the demand for more data centers?
Yeah, good point, Dishon. Actually, nowadays we are seeing that this strategic move by organizations to reduce its costs, right? So everyone is looking to reduce the costs. So cloud adaptation will be one of his choices. And of course, to mitigate any risk of building his own data center and put a lot of capex into it, right? So, and in addition to achieve the scalability of the data center capabilities, cloud adaptation would be his good choice to do that. So, various organizations, depending about the depths of their cloud adaptation, they can deploy it, but they have to take into consideration some action points. So, for example, potential security threats and control, the compliance assessment during the cloud adaptation. This kind of measurement or measures for the compliance is really important to ensure security for your data of your organization and accountability for the data and the application for the cloud services. So of course, we are seeing a lot of move from enterprises and organizations for the data center or the cloud adaptation. In addition to the cloud adaptation, which is one of the factors that impacting the business segment, if you look to the other side of the world we are living in, our normal day-to-day activity or our normal, social life, the digital economy of the Middle East in terms of online shopping, online education, online healthcare, doing your governmental kind of services online. Right, during the pandemic, we have seen excess use for that. And even post the pandemic, I'm expecting that this will continue, right? So this digital economy of the Middle East will play a vital role for the increase of the data center market as well. So if you look to different sectors, for example, in KSA for the educational sector, right? There is a new academy that has been started this initiative in June 2020, which is during the peak of the pandemic, which is an online kind of academy, which having around 3 million kind of students for this sector, which is online. It's one of a kind for KSA or the kingdom to do it, and it was during the pandemic. So this gives you insight about the digital transformation for the of the digital economy in the Middle East. The big giant of STC, which is Saudi Telecom company. We're seeing a lot of large scale data centers in the big regions, Jeddah, Medina, and Riyadh. Right. So we are seeing movement towards digital economy deployment plans in KSA, as well for Egypt, for example. So Egypt government have launched a project called Digital Egypt. This Digital Egypt will be operated by, I believe, the telecommunication of Egypt. This is give you what is going in the digital transformation for Egypt, right? Apart from the, of course, we have covered the cloud adaptation. For UAE, we have said that the 5G deployment will help into the digital economy for all the sectors, educational, healthcare, services, and social media, and whatever, right? Also, one of the countries that we didn't cover, but I guess slowly but surely, is Oman. So Oman have put a 5 years plan for the online education. And I believe a lot of investment in going into this kind of deployment for Oman future by 2025. This is a digital platform construction for these countries in the Middle East, and I'm sure the same applies for Africa as well. If you look to other to what is happening as well with the big giants of the Chinese Huawei, have signed a lot of contracts for telecommunication for the 5G deployment in different countries in our area. As you have rightly said, we've shown Kuwait, UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, and others are in line or going in the same direction. So a lot is happening in terms of the digital economy transformation, business-wise, for the cloud application, and even social life and other aspects of our day-to-day activities. So, yeah, this is what I'm seeing in the region, the GCC specifically.
Yeah, digital transformation, Maggie, as you mentioned, I'm just the exact same thoughts. The amount of governmental influence it's had in even again coming to UAE, where you and I are based. Education was the first to move online, and they moved seamlessly. There wasn't a hiccup, there wasn't a gap. One day it was in person, the next day it was online. I think that's a clear indication where a lot of other countries have struggled. I think in the Middle East, because of the infrastructure available, already set, that was done quite seamlessly. Warwick, to come to the similar question, was there a wake-up call of sorts for enterprises, the businesses in Southern Africa or in South Africa, which said, we need to go onto the cloud, right? Now we need to embrace what's coming up next.
Most certainly, Dishon, although partially a strategic intent for some in the not too distant future, I believe COVID-19 fast-tracked the way enterprises thought of and the way they adopted cloud-based technology. COVID-19 lockdown, in essence, disabled individuals, SMEs, corporates, and even to some extent governmental sectors from operating. Cloud-based adaptation enablers include infrastructure, cloud-front networks, and points of presence. So without this, operationally, you are non-existent. Data center co-location and server connectivity, in my view, is now a strategic must-have to ensure organizations have that business continuity that they need. Once customers are on board and have tested the technology, the functionality, the overall management and IT support frameworks that are available, further utilization and reliance, in my view, within the data center space will be the most logical next step. Non-believers, skeptics have to some extent been forced to adopt digitalization and make use of cloud-based technologies due to their new home and work environment constraints. So yes, I do think there has been a wake-up call for cloud adoption, not just in South Africa, but in most of the countries, Dishon.
Yeah, I'm seeing the exact same thing, especially with SMEs across West Africa. Again, a lot of startups, a lot of drive to create something new, leveraging technology and the higher access speeds, lower costs of access to the internet and cloud services. And again, I think COVID was the stimulus. If anything, COVID was that wake-up call, right? Here you need to now consciously get online, get connected, right, and enable you to do whatever you need, whether it's like you touched about medical or education or healthcare or providing a service. You need to be online. You need to be able to work from anywhere you are. Maggie, I'm going to come to you a little bit, and I'd like you to, just for the sake of time, time flies, but for the sake of time, since you are very close to a lot of consultants, are you seeing any trends, general trends in design requests for data centers in terms of the general structure? Are you seeing a shift or change of anything?
Yeah, great question, Dishon. And I believe just to, for the sake of time as well, I'm seeing a lot of, we are witnessing a gradual shift from rack-based kind of service to glad one to support the high density operations. This is something that we are seeing after post the pandemic, getting a lot of this kind of transformation in the DC kind of business. Also, in terms of the storage drive market in the last 5 years, it has grown rapidly. And of course, thanks to the social media and a lot of other applications which need a lot of storage for its kind of business, right? So in the last few years, the demand for faster storage solutions has increased to high data generation in the Middle East market. Also, if you look to countries in the Middle East, so we are seeing the redundancy N+1 kind of power systems is deployed. And of course, the Tier 3 data centers is in a lot of projects under design currently, and even Tier 4. I'm seeing that tier 1 and tier 2 data center have declined in the Middle East in the last few years. And the N+1 kind of power infrastructure is mostly for the 12 megawatt and above data centers. It's always done in the tier 3 kind of data centers, and tier 4 is actually upcoming in a lot of projects. I'm not seeing any deployment of tier 1 or tier 2 in 1 mega and below. It's very rare. But this is, as a general idea about what is happening in the tier certifications for the data centers. So a lot of underdevelopment projects across the region nowadays is falling under tier 3, particularly for the for the Middle East region or the MENA region specifically.
Yeah, that is, again, very interesting to see if the trends and requirements are changing. I think a lot of people in our audience are interested in that, right? Where is the industry going? Is there a shift? Also for audience, remembering here, if you are looking to do a project, bear in mind that, us at Cummins around the Middle East and even in South Africa, we have an extensive range of well-proven diesel gensets and even gas products where it can be used. But especially for data center needs, a well-proven range of data center continuous rated gensets, which are uptime approved. So if you are looking to create an uptime certified facility, if you're going to invest, you're going to make one. Warwick, you mentioned a little bit earlier in your comments as well that it is safer to have a tier 3 or 4 rated facility, right? Then definitely do let us know. And we are there from day one to help you look at that electrical design, provide you with that product, and of course, take care of it during its entire lifetime, right? We're here for that. Warwick, again, I'm just weary. We got only about 10 minutes left, and I've got a couple of questions that I've seen coming and pop up from the audience. But before we go into that, are you seeing a demand for electrical power changing in South Africa or Southern Africa, anywhere? Just if you would like to comment quickly on that.
Yes, certainly I am seeing that. But in my view, electrical power usage, Dishon, will certainly be approached differently, depending on the capabilities and willingness of either the individual countries or end users. Just quickly, the 3 top equipment power demand loads within DCs are IT servers, which consume up to 45% of the power requirements, followed by HVAC at about 33%, and UPS losses anything from 2 to 7%. So these 3 alone constitute an approximate 85% of the total consumption needs. So therefore, through innovation and technology improvements, these 3 largest equipment consumption contributors, in my view, could significantly reduce the electrical demand kilowattage usage. Other considerations could be a larger or different types of UPS utilizations, battery technology as an example, where there's innovation, where hydrogen fuel cells potentially are incorporated. We can look at different increased rack power densities and, of course, innovation around switching ports. So, this technology is really appropriate or applicable depending on the investor's balance sheet strength, if you will, and willingness to make the change. Large investors, I think, will move quicker. International corporates are normally under the pressures to sort of comply with the carbon tax regulations, or they've got a roadmap to get to these regulations, and as well as shareholder influences. These will certainly drive how electrical power is produced and utilized. And then just on the flip side, smaller countries, new startups, where there's just not huge balance sheets, maybe their strategic intent is initially just to have connectivity, entry-level service requirements, and then maybe down the road, a phased approach for electrical consumption efficiency initiatives and best practices to be followed. So that would be my view just on that, Dishon.
Thanks, Warwick. But was yeah, helpful. I mean, if we do change the electrical load, there could be room for significant savings. But yeah, technology adoption does come at a slightly higher capex initially. Warwick, Maggie, in terms of the questions that I had for all of us today, that's covering it, and it's quite interesting. We've moved in the beginning to see how Middle East has recovered. We've now explored how South Africa actually is back open for business with significant projects coming up in the Southern African region, and the drivers of growth being really strong. We've explored how West Africa seemingly has not felt the effect, and it's been business as usual. The only impact has been perhaps the investment required to continue with the projects, and they are back in line. Just before we close, I got a couple of questions that are in the Q&A box. I'd like to just take one for the sake of time. The question actually is very topical. How do you see Cummins playing a role in such new trends of data centers and new smart cities? I know we talked a lot about smart cities. Maggie, you mentioned quite a lot. I'll start, and Maggie, perhaps you can finish off a little bit. Carrying on to this conversation, something Warwick just mentioned in terms of new power, in terms of new technology. So if you are following Cummins on social media, if you're not, I do encourage you to do so. You will see that Cummins is taking massive strides in the field of moving towards other alternative sources for providing power, and in the form of fuel cell technology, in the form of hydrogen generation through electrolysis. So definitely, and you might have also seen that, you know, our CEO, Tom Linebarger, is now co-chair of the Hydrogen Council internationally. So definitely in terms of setting the trend and leading the thought, setting the stage in technology and where we go, we are playing a role. In terms of smart cities, Maggie, if you would like to say a couple of sentences and words.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. Actually, in terms of smart cities, the goal is to reduce the carbon footprint, right? So in this, Cummins is contributing with different kind of technologies for that. So we have our US range product, which is compliant with emission regulation of Tier 2 and Tier 4 emission compliance, which is reducing the carbon emissions. So some of the new developing area, for example, in Saudi, is going with the Spring, which is the emissionized product from Cummins, right? And there is other smart cities, which is 100% renewable, is going with all the hydrogen initiatives and the energy transformation. So as we all know, that, for example, Europe has announced that by 2030, there will be no fossil fuel kind of cars to be working on hydrogen. So Cummins as well is playing a great role in that. We have our hydrogen fuel cells, which is packaged fuel cells, which is powering just like the diesel genset, but with zero emissions, zero carbon. So this can fit into the initiatives by 2030 of Saudi or Master City of UAE, in addition to the hydrogen production as well. And so in terms of different products that fit to the different goals of the government's initiatives and the energy transformation, we are playing a vital role in that. So reach out to us if you need any support in terms of these kind of products. We can help you to select what's right for your goal.
Maggie, thank you very much for taking the time. Warwick, same towards you. I hope we can fly down and I can see you in person in Johannesburg soon. I really do appreciate the amount of research that you've done and to come up with this data from different sources, of course. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
audience, thank you, Maggie. Audience, I do also would like to thank you all for joining in today. I know your time is precious, and we do hope that you've taken at least something back in terms of what's happening in the Middle East and different parts of Africa. In terms of what we offer, we definitely call upon you to contact us. You can reach Cummins.com on the data center page. You'll have a great many resources on case studies, brochures, and information about our products. There's plenty of information on powersuite.com. The link is also on your screen as well. There is free continuing education sessions where you can upskill and use that knowledge, which is available in terms of the Power Hour sessions. Also, if you've got a project and you need some help, do not hesitate to contact us. You can reach us at cummins.middleeast@cummins.com. There's a phone number there for you as well. Take a screen cap of that and feel free to let us know so that we can help you out from day one. Do follow us on social media so that in the future, we can keep you in the loop of other webinars as well. I'm Dishan Munshi. It was a pleasure. Until next time, thank you very much and have a great day.